The pressure gauge ticked steadily downward as the Prometheus continued its descent into the dark waters beneath the Arctic ice sheet. I watched the numbers tick past on the display, mentally calculating the increasing tons of pressure bearing down on our titanium hull. 800 meters now. 900. The submersible's exterior lights cut through the blackness, illuminating nothing but empty water and the occasional curious fish that would dart into view and then vanish just as quickly. "We're approaching the target depth," I said, adjusting my position in the cramped confines of the observation deck. My voice sounded unnaturally loud in the quiet hum of the submersible's systems. Beside me, Director Vance leaned forward in his seat, his eyes fixed on the forward viewport. The cold blue glow from the instrument panels highlighted the sharp angles of his face. "The thermal imaging picked up something significant down here," he said. "Something that shouldn't exist at these depths." I nodded, though my attention remained on the sensor readings scrolling across my tablet. Hydrothermal activity is rare under ice sheets, but not unprecedented. The readings suggested unusual mineral formations, possibly sculptured by the currents. "Not just unusual, Dr. Thorne. Unprecedented." Vance's tone carried that familiar edge of impatience. He'd been like this since we'd left the research station 3 days ago, driven, almost feverish with anticipation. From the engineering station behind us, Kenji Tanaka cleared his throat. "Hull integrity at optimal levels. All systems functioning within normal parameters." His voice was steady, measured, a sharp contrast to Vance's barely contained excitement. I turned to offer Kenji a small smile of appreciation. In the 6 months we'd worked together on this expedition, I'd come to value his methodical approach and quiet competence. His hands moved across his control panel with practiced efficiency, making minute adjustments to our descent. 1,200 meters, Kenji announced, approaching the anomaly in approximately 3 minutes. The Prometheus was the most advanced deep-sea research vessel ever constructed, a marvel of engineering that had cost the National Oceanic Research Institute nearly $500 million. Its development had been Vance's crowning achievement as director, the culmination of a decade-long push to secure funding and political support. Now he sat at the helm of his creation, ready to claim whatever discoveries awaited us in the depths. I joined the project 2 years ago, my background in marine xenobiology making me uniquely qualified to study extreme environments and the life that might exist there. What had drawn me to the Arctic expedition wasn't just the professional opportunity, but the genuine belief that we might find something that changed our understanding of life on Earth. "Lights at maximum," Vance commanded, his fingers drumming against the armrest of his chair. The external floods brightened, cutting through the darkness with greater intensity. We were approaching the seafloor now, a barren expanse of silt and rock that stretched beyond the reach of our lights. "I'm detecting increasing thermal variations," I said, watching the temperature readings fluctuate, consistent with hydrothermal vent activity. "There," Kenji said quietly, pointing toward the starboard viewport. In the distance, barely visible at the edge of our light's reach, a faint glow pulsed in the darkness. As Vance adjusted our course toward it, the glow resolved into distinct points of light, dozens of them scattered across the ocean floor. "My God," Vance whispered. As we drew closer, what had appeared as simple points of light transformed into something else entirely, something impossible. "That can't be," I said, my training momentarily forgotten as wonder overtook scientific detachment. Rising from the seafloor was a forest, there was no other word for it, of crystalline structures. They ranged from the size of my hand to formations taller than our submersible. Each one caught our lights and seemed to amplify them, refracting the beams into rainbow patterns that danced across the barren seabed. But most incredible of all, they pulsed with their own internal light. a gentle rhythmic glow that seemed to pass through the structures in waves. "Are you recording this?" Vance asked, his voice hushed. "All cameras active," Kenji confirmed. "Data feeds are clean." I leaned forward, my face almost touching the thick glass of the viewport. The structures resembled nothing I'd ever seen in nature. Geometric, yet organic, with facets and angles that caught the light in ways that seemed almost deliberate. They clustered around what was clearly a hydrothermal vent, a black smoker releasing superheated water into the frigid deep. "These formations," I began, struggling to find the right words. "They're not random mineral deposits. Look at the organization, the way they're positioned around the vent." Vance nodded slowly. "They're growing toward the heat source." "Not just growing," I said, the implications hitting me all at once. "These are biological structures, silicon-based, not carbon." The significance of what we were seeing crashed over me like a wave. In all of Earth's history, life had developed exclusively around carbon chemistry. The flexibility of carbon bonds, the way carbon atoms could form long chains and complex molecules, these properties had made carbon the foundation of all known life. But here, more than a kilometer beneath the Arctic ice, we were looking at something that had taken an entirely different evolutionary path. "A separate genesis event," I said, my voice barely audible over the hum of the submersible systems. "Life that evolved completely independently from everything else on Earth." Vance's expression transformed, his eyes widening as he processed the implications. "Do you understand what this means, Eris? This is the greatest scientific discovery of the century, possibly of human history." I nodded, unable to look away from the pulsing crystal forest. "We need to proceed with extreme caution. These structures could be incredibly fragile. We should maintain distance and conduct passive observations only." "Passive?" Vance turned to me, his expression incredulous. "Eris, we're talking about a Nobel Prize at minimum. Patents on silicon-based biological technologies would be worth trillions. The potential applications—" "We know nothing about these organisms," I interrupted, finally tearing my gaze from the viewport to meet his eyes. "We have no idea how they might react to interference. Standard xenobiological protocols dictate observation first, interaction only after we've established baseline behaviors." Vance's jaw tightened. "We're not dealing with some deep-sea squid, Doctor. This is an entirely new form of life. The Institute didn't spend $500 million on this submersible so we could take pictures from a distance. With respect, Director, that's exactly why we should be cautious. This discovery is too important to risk contamination or damage through hasty action." Kenji spoke up from his station. "The structures appear to be reacting to our presence. The pulse patterns have accelerated since we approached." We all turned back to the viewport. He was right. The gentle rhythm of light flowing through the crystal formations had quickened, almost like a heartbeat increasing in response to stimulus. "They're sensing us," I said quietly. "They have some form of perception." Vance leaned forward, his earlier frustration replaced by naked ambition. "Precisely why we need samples. Imagine the possibilities if we could understand their sensory mechanisms. Silicon-based computing is already the backbone of our technology. But silicon-based biology, the applications would be limitless." "Director," I said firmly, "I strongly recommend we maintain our current position and conduct thorough observation before considering any collection activities. We need to understand what we're dealing with." The crystal forest continued its hypnotic pulsing, each wave of light passing from one structure to another in patterns too complex to be random. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, studied with the same intensity with which we were studying them. "Look at them," Vance said softly, almost reverently. Billions of years of parallel evolution, completely untouched by humanity until this moment. He turned to me, his expression hardened with resolve. Your caution is noted, Doctor, but this discovery belongs to history now, and we will not waste this opportunity. The tension between us hung in the air, as palpable as the pressure bearing down on the Prometheus's hull. In that moment, as we faced each other in the dim blue light of the control room, I knew that the true discovery wasn't just the impossible crystal forest outside our viewport. It was the revelation of how far Vance would go to claim it as his own. Outside, in the crushing darkness of the Arctic deep, the crystal structures continued their silent, rhythmic pulsing, unaware that their isolation was about to end. Director Vance, we need to follow standard contamination protocols. My voice carried more force than usual in the confined space of the control room. We're looking at an entirely unknown life form. The risks of interaction are incalculable. Vance didn't turn from the viewport, his eyes fixed on the pulsing crystal structures outside. Your objections are noted, Doctor, but I've made my decision. The crystal forest continued its hypnotic display, waves of light rippling through the formations like neural impulses. Each structure seemed to communicate with those nearby, creating complex patterns that defied random chance. In my 15 years of xenobiology research, I'd never encountered anything remotely similar. We don't understand their biology, I said, trying a different approach. Silicon-based life shouldn't even be possible under Earth conditions. We need time to observe before we interact. Vance finally turned to face me. The cold blue light from the control panels cast harsh shadows across his face, giving him a mask-like appearance. Time is exactly what we don't have. Our mission window is narrow, and the Institute expects results, not caution. The Institute would expect us to follow proper scientific procedure, I countered. Contamination works both ways. We could damage these organisms, or they could pose unforeseen risks to us. Standard protocol demands at least 72 hours of observation before collection. From his engineering station, Kenji spoke up. Dr. Thorne is right. We don't know how these structures might react to physical contact. Vance's jaw tightened. Last I checked, Mr. Tanaka, you were hired as an engineer, not a scientific advisor. I stepped closer to Vance, lowering my voice. Please, let's document them properly first. We can collect samples on the next dive if observation shows it's safe. For a moment, I thought he might reconsider. Then his eyes hardened. Prepare the collection arm, he ordered, turning to the young lab assistant who sat at the mechanical controls. Target one of the smaller specimens. Marcus, the assistant, hesitated, glancing between Vance and me. Now, Mr. Reynolds, Vance said sharply. Yes, sir. Marcus turned to his console, fingers moving across the controls. I watched in frustrated silence as the submersible's robotic arm extended from its housing beneath the viewport. The precision manipulator was designed for delicate sampling operations, but using it now, before we understood what we were dealing with, felt reckless. Target the fist-sized formation at 2 o'clock, Vance instructed, pointing to a particularly active crystal structure that pulsed with more intensity than those around it. It appears to be a discrete unit, possibly newly formed. I studied the formation. Unlike the larger structures that rose like trees from the seafloor, this one sat apart, its geometric pattern more compact and regular. Its light pulsed in a complex rhythm that seemed almost deliberate. Wait, I said, sudden alarm rising in me. That one's different. The pulse pattern is too complex compared to the others. Vance ignored me, nodding to Marcus. Proceed with collection. The manipulator arm moved with precision through the water, its camera feed displayed on our secondary monitors. As it approached the crystal formation, I noticed something unsettling. The surrounding structures seemed to pulse faster, their light patterns changing in what almost looked like agitation. "They're reacting to our approach," I said, pointing to the monitor. "The entire colony is responding defensively." "Fascinating," Vance murmured, but gave no order to stop. The manipulator arm extended its collection scoop, carefully positioning itself around the targeted formation. On the monitors, the pulse rate of all visible structures accelerated further. "Director, please." I made one last attempt. "At least let us deploy a passive sensor package first. We can gather data without direct." "Collection secured," Marcus announced as the manipulator closed around the crystal formation. The moment the mechanical fingers touched the formation, a synchronized flash of light rippled through the entire crystal forest. The effect was immediate and unmistakable: communication. "Did you see that?" Kenji asked, leaning forward at his station. "Record everything," Vance ordered, his voice tight with excitement. The manipulator arm detached the formation from its base with a gentle twist. As it lifted away, I could have sworn the lights in the surrounding structures dimmed momentarily, like a collective exhalation. "Bringing sample to containment airlock," Marcus reported, his voice betraying a mixture of excitement and unease. I watched the monitors as the arm retracted, bringing the pulsing crystal formation toward the submersible's external sample bay. The formation, roughly the size of my fist, continued its rhythmic pulsing, though I noticed the pattern had changed, becoming faster and more erratic. "Its pulse signature is altering," I said, quickly making notes on my tablet. "The removal from its environment is causing stress responses." "All the more reason to get it into the lab quickly," Vance replied. "We need to stabilize it." The sample bay closed around the crystal formation, sealing it in the pressurized transfer chamber that would maintain its deep-sea environment while moving it into our onboard lab. "Transfer complete," Marcus confirmed, beginning decontamination sequence. Standard protocol dictated that all external samples undergo a rigorous decontamination process before entering the main lab. But as I watched the monitors showing the crystal in the transfer chamber, I wondered if our human-centered protocols made any sense for this alien life form. "The decontamination chemicals could damage it," I warned. "We should modify the protocol." Vance considered this, then nodded. "Skip chemical treatment. Maintain pressure and temperature only." At least he was willing to concede that much. I turned to Kenji. "Can you monitor hull integrity? I want to make sure there's no unforeseen interaction with our systems." "Already on it," he replied, his fingers flying across his control panel. "No anomalies detected in the hull or surrounding systems." "Let's move to the lab," Vance said, unbuckling from his seat. "I want to begin analysis immediately." The biocontainment lab was located 2 decks below the control room, a state-of-the-art facility designed to safely study potentially hazardous biological samples. As we made our way there through the narrow corridors of the submersible, I tried once more to urge caution. "We should establish observation protocols before we begin any invasive testing," I said, hurrying to keep up with Vance's long strides. "Silicon-based biology will require entirely new approaches." "That's precisely why this discovery is so valuable," Vance replied without slowing. "Imagine the applications, Eris. Silicon computing is already the backbone of our technology. Silicon biology could revolutionize everything from medicine to materials science." "That's exactly my point. We're dealing with something unprecedented. Rushing could destroy what we don't yet understand." We reached the lab, where Marcus was already preparing the examination chamber. The crystal formation would be transferred from the external bay into this sealed environment, where we could study it while maintaining its deep-sea pressure and temperature conditions. "Transfer ready," Marcus announced as we entered. Awaiting final authorization. The lab was compact but efficiently designed, with 3 separate workstations surrounding a central containment unit. Advanced imaging equipment and analytical tools lined the walls, ready to examine whatever we brought inside. Vance straightened his jacket and nodded. "Begin transfer." I moved to the monitoring station, preparing to record every aspect of the specimen's behavior as it entered the lab. Despite my objections to Vance's methods, my scientific curiosity was undeniable. We were about to examine a form of life that until today had been considered theoretically impossible. A soft hum filled the lab as the transfer mechanism activated. Through the reinforced glass of the containment unit, we watched as the crystal formation slid from the external bay into the examination chamber. Under the lab's bright lights, its structure was even more remarkable than it had appeared on the monitors. The formation resembled a perfect geode, but instead of mineral crystals filling its interior, it contained an organized lattice of translucent, faceted structures that caught and refracted the light. Each facet pulsed with its own internal glow that synchronized with others in complex patterns, creating waves of light that moved through the entire formation. "Magnificent," Vance whispered, pressing closer to the glass. Marcus quickly began adjusting the scanning equipment, initiating preliminary scans, spectral analysis, density mapping, and energy detection all coming online. I checked the environmental controls, ensuring we were maintaining the exact conditions of the deep-sea vent where we'd found the formation. Temperature stable at 4 degrees Celsius, pressure holding at 120 atmospheres. "Look at the complexity," Vance said, pointing to the formation. "Those aren't random mineral deposits. There's organization, purpose." He was right. The crystal lattice within the geode-like formation had a structure too regular to be explained by normal mineral formation processes. It resembled circuit pathways more than natural crystal growth. The first scan results began appearing on our screens. Composition analysis shows primarily silicon dioxide with trace elements of rare earth metals, Marcus reported. But the molecular organization is unlike anything in our database. I studied the energy readings with growing fascination. It's generating its own electromagnetic field. Weak, but definitely present. "What about the light pulses?" Vance asked. "Can we quantify the patterns?" Marcus adjusted the sensors. "They appear to follow a non-random sequence. I'm running it through pattern recognition now." As we watched, I noticed something concerning. The pulse rate is increasing. The rhythm of light waves moving through the crystal had indeed accelerated, becoming noticeably faster than when we'd first brought it aboard. The colors seemed to intensify as well, shifting from gentle blues to more vibrant purples and pinks. "It's responding to the scans," Kenji suggested from where he monitored the lab's systems. "The electromagnetic sensors might be stimulating it somehow. Or it's responding to being removed from its environment," I added. "Possibly a stress response." Vance leaned closer to the containment glass. "Whatever it is, it's beautiful. Increase scan intensity. I want to see what's happening at the molecular level." "Sir," Marcus said hesitantly, "if Dr. Thorne is right about it being stressed, maybe we should." "Increase the scan intensity," Vance repeated firmly. Marcus complied, adjusting the settings on the molecular scanner. The beam strengthened, penetrating deeper into the crystal structure. The effect was immediate. The pulsing light within the formation surged dramatically, flashing in rapid, almost frantic patterns. The colors shifted again, this time to deep reds and intense whites that hurt the eyes. "It's definitely responding to the scan," I said, quickly reducing the power. "We should back off." But Vance was transfixed. "No, this is exactly what we want to see." Active response to stimulus proves it's not just an unusual mineral formation. "Director," Kenji called from his station, voice tight with concern. "I'm detecting unusual energy signatures from the specimen. They're increasing exponentially." I moved to his console and felt my stomach drop at the readings. The energy output has tripled in the last 60 seconds. On the other side of the lab, Marcus suddenly called out, "Look, there's something happening to the surface." We all turned toward the containment unit. Under the bright lights of the examination chamber, a thin line had appeared across the surface of the crystal formation, a hairline fracture that hadn't been there before. "Is it breaking?" Vance asked, stepping closer. The fracture widened slightly, extending across the surface of the formation in a precise geometric pattern. It wasn't random damage. It looked intentional, organized, like the deliberate opening of a seal. "That's not stress damage," I said, the realization hitting me with cold clarity. "Director, we need to terminate this examination immediately." "Why would we do that when we're just seeing our first significant reaction?" Vance demanded. The fracture continued to spread, creating an intricate pattern across the surface. More concerning, the light pulses had synchronized into a single, steady rhythm, like a heartbeat growing stronger. "Because," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "that's not a geode." Kenji understood immediately. "It's an egg." The silence that followed was broken only by the soft hum of the lab equipment and the increasingly urgent beeping of our monitoring systems as they registered the growing energy signature from within the crystalline formation. "An egg?" Vance repeated, his expression shifting from confusion to awe. "You mean—" "We haven't collected a rock sample," I confirmed, already moving toward the emergency containment controls. "We've removed an embryonic life form from its development site. And now—" I pointed to the widening fracture pattern. "It's hatching." Marcus stepped back from the containment unit, his face pale. "What do we do?" "We need to increase containment protocols," I said, activating the secondary shield around the examination chamber. "And we need to consider returning it to its environment immediately." "Return it?" Vance looked at me incredulously. "This is exactly the kind of discovery we came here for. We're witnessing the birth of an entirely new form of life." "A life form we know nothing about," I countered. "One that's clearly responding to our presence and technologies in ways we don't understand." As if to emphasize my point, the fracture pattern suddenly completed itself, creating a perfect geometric design across the entire surface of the egg-like formation. The pulsing light inside intensified to an almost blinding brightness. "Energy levels still climbing," Kenji reported tensely. "Whatever's happening, it's accelerating." Vance stood transfixed before the containment unit, his ambition blinding him to the danger. "Record everything, every instrument at maximum sensitivity." I moved to stand between him and the containment unit. "Director, I am formally invoking Safety Protocol 9. As Chief Science Officer, I'm ordering immediate termination of this examination and return of the specimen to its native environment." Protocol 9 was rarely invoked. It gave the science officer authority to override the mission director when imminent biological hazard was detected. Even Vance couldn't ignore it without facing serious consequences back at the Institute. For a moment, Vance looked like he might challenge me. Then the egg pulsed again, the fracture lines glowing with intense white light, and a faint sound emanated from within. Something between a crystalline chime and an electronic hum. That's sound," Marcus said, amazement overcoming his fear. It's making sound underwater. Not just sound, Kenji corrected, checking his instruments. It's generating ultrasonic pulses. Highly structured ones. I met Vance's eyes, willing him to understand the gravity of our situation. We need to return it now, before it fully hatches. We've already interfered too much. Vance's jaw worked as he struggled with the decision. His career ambitions warred visibly with scientific protocol and common sense. Before he could respond, a new alarm sounded from Kenji's station. Energy spike, it's... The fracture lines on the egg suddenly illuminated with blinding intensity, forcing us to shield our eyes. When the light dimmed enough to see again, the surface of the egg had changed. The fracture lines now formed a clear pattern of interlocking geometric sections, like an intricate puzzle box on the verge of opening. We had made a catastrophic error in judgment. We hadn't just collected a sample. We had abducted a child. And now, surrounded by strange energies and unfamiliar technology, torn from its home environment, that child was about to be born. The fracture lines on the egg illuminated with geometric precision, forming an elaborate pattern across its crystalline surface. I stared, transfixed by the mathematical perfection of what was unfolding before us. This wasn't random breakage. It was a deliberate, encoded process of emergence. "Everyone back away from the containment unit," I ordered, my voice cutting through the tense silence of the lab. "Kenji, prepare emergency containment measures." No one moved. Vance remained rooted in place, his eyes wide and hungry as he watched the egg's transformation. Marcus stood beside him, scanner still clutched in his hands, equally mesmerized. "Now," I shouted, breaking the spell. The fracture lines continued their elegant expansion, not cracking chaotically as a conventional egg might, but unfolding with the precision of origami, each section rotating and sliding along predetermined paths. The pulsing light emanating from within intensified with each movement, casting prismatic reflections across the lab's sterile surfaces. "It's beautiful," Marcus whispered. Vance nodded slowly. "We're witnessing the birth of an entirely new form of life." I moved toward the emergency protocols panel. "We're witnessing something we don't understand in a contained environment that wasn't designed for it. Our priority needs to be..." My words died as the egg completed its transformation. The geometric sections had fully retracted, revealing what lay within. The creature, because there was no other word for it, resembled nothing I'd ever seen in my years of xenobiology research. It filled the space where the egg had been, a shifting mass that seemed both solid and liquid simultaneously. Its surface caught the light like mercury but fractured it like shattered glass. The crystalline material flowed and reshaped itself continuously, forming complex structures that emerged and dissolved in rhythmic patterns. Occasional ripples of light pulsed through its body, similar to the communications we'd observed in the crystal forest. "Remarkable," Vance breathed. "Are you getting this, Marcus?" "Yes, sir. All scanners active." Marcus adjusted the settings, leaning closer to the containment glass. "Composition reading is unusual. The silicon base appears to be in a state that shouldn't be stable. It's organizing itself through some kind of electrochemical process." I checked the containment field readings. Energy output is still increasing. Whatever metabolic process is occurring, it's accelerating. The creature, the seedling, my mind supplied unbidden, seemed to respond to our voices, its flowing mass oriented toward us, developing what almost looked like sensory organs, crystalline protrusions that angled in our direction. "It's aware of us," I said quietly. Kenji's voice came from the monitoring station. "Dr. Thorne, I'm detecting unusual interactions between the specimen and our scanning equipment. The energy patterns are communicating somehow. I glanced at his screen and felt my stomach tighten. The data showed clear evidence of signal exchange between our electronic systems and the creature. Not interference, but actual information transfer. "Cut the active scans," I ordered. "Passive monitoring only." "But we're just getting detailed readings," Vance protested. "Look at the pattern matching," I said, pointing to Kenji's screen. "It's not just responding to our scans. It's learning from them. We need to limit interaction until we understand what we're dealing with." Marcus reluctantly powered down the molecular scanner, but kept the video recording active. The creature responded immediately, its movements becoming more languid as the energy beams withdrew. "I want to test its reaction to physical stimulus," Vance said, moving toward the manipulator controls. I stepped between him and the panel. "Absolutely not. We've already removed it from its natural environment and subjected it to invasive scanning. Any further interaction risks contamination. Both ways." "Dr. Thorne," Vance's voice dropped to a dangerous quiet, "may I remind you that while Protocol 9 gives you authority in matters of biological hazard, my judgment supersedes yours in research methodology." "This isn't about methodology," I countered. "It's about basic safety. We're dealing with a completely unknown life form with demonstrated ability to interact with our technology. We need to exercise extreme caution." While we argued, I didn't notice Marcus moving closer to the containment unit. He had put on a pair of handling gloves, the heavily insulated type that extended into the containment area through sealed ports, allowing researchers to manipulate samples without breaking the environmental seal. "Marcus," Kenji called out in warning. "What are you doing?" I turned to see Marcus inserting his gloved hands into the handling ports. "I'm just going to check its texture," he explained. "The gloves have multiple layers of protection." "Stop!" I lunged toward him, but it was too late. Marcus's gloved right hand reached toward the flowing crystalline entity. The seedling seemed to pause, its mercurial surface stilling momentarily as it oriented toward the approaching appendage. Then, with startling speed, it extended a tendril that made contact with the tip of Marcus's glove. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the glove's surface began to change where the creature touched it, not melting or burning, but transforming. The material shifted from dark blue to a translucent crystalline structure that spread across the glove like ice forming on water. "It's cold," Marcus said, his voice filled with wonder rather than fear. "And buzzing, like touching a mild electric current." "Pull your hand back," I ordered. "Now, Marcus." He tried. I saw his arm tense with effort, but the glove didn't move. "I can't," he said, confusion replacing wonder. "It's stuck." The crystalline transformation continued to spread up the glove toward the sealed port where it connected with the containment wall. More concerning, I could see the material beginning to penetrate the glove's layers. "Emergency protocol!" I shouted, racing to the control panel. "Kenji, prepare for containment breach. Vance, help me isolate the lab." Vance finally seemed to grasp the danger. He moved swiftly to the emergency station, activating the lab's isolation shield. Steel shutters began descending over the doors and ventilation shafts. "What's happening?" Marcus asked, his voice rising in pitch. "I can't feel my fingers." The transformation had reached the port seal and was advancing along the inner layer of the glove. Where it spread, the material became transparent, revealing Marcus's hand within. And to my horror, the change wasn't stopping at the glove. The skin of Marcus's fingers had begun to take on the same crystalline quality, becoming translucent and faceted. Tiny points of light pulsed beneath the surface, racing up his fingertips toward his palm. "I can see through my skin," he said, his voice eerily calm. It doesn't hurt. It feels interesting. I reached the emergency release for the handling ports and hesitated. Releasing Marcus's arm would break containment and potentially expose us all. Not releasing it would leave him connected to the creature. Cut power to the containment unit, I ordered Kenji. Maybe reducing the available energy will slow it down. Kenji complied, shutting down all systems connected to the examination chamber. The overhead lights dimmed to emergency backup, casting the lab in a reddish glow. But the transformation of Marcus's arm didn't slow. If anything, it accelerated. The crystalline change had passed his wrist now, crawling steadily up his forearm. Where it spread, his flesh became transparent, revealing structures within that were no longer recognizably human. His blood vessels shimmered with points of light similar to what we'd seen in the crystal forest. Bones took on a faceted, geometric quality. "I can feel it in my mind," Marcus said, his voice dreamy and distant. "It's like seeing colors I never knew existed." Vance came to stand beside me, his face pale in the emergency lighting. "Can we sever the arm?" he asked quietly. "I don't know if that would stop it," I replied honestly. "And we don't know if it's reached his bloodstream yet." Marcus turned toward us, his expression bizarrely serene. The transformation had reached his elbow now, the sleeve of his uniform shredding as crystalline structures erupted through the fabric. His forearm no longer resembled human anatomy, but rather an intricate sculpture of silicon and light. "It's not hurting me," he said. "It's changing me. I can feel so much more now. The heat signatures in the room, the electrical impulses in the equipment." His eyes widened. "I can sense your nervous systems, the electrical patterns of your thoughts." The calm wonder in his voice created a disturbing contrast with the horror of his transformation. This wasn't a creature causing pain or attacking in any conventional sense. It was something far more insidious, a systematic conversion of organic matter into something else entirely. "Marcus," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "we're going to help you, but you need to fight this. Try to pull away again." He smiled, an expression that seemed out of place given the circumstances. "Why would I fight it? This is amazing. I understand so much now. The silicon substrate allows for neural transmission speeds that carbon biology could never achieve." The transformation continued past his elbow, accelerating as it went. The points of light within his transformed tissue brightened and began to pulse in patterns matching those of the seedling in the containment unit. "They're communicating," Kenji said from behind me. The pattern matching is identical to what we saw between the structures on the seafloor. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the lab's temperature. This wasn't just assimilation, it was recruitment. The creature wasn't destroying Marcus, it was incorporating him, turning him into an extension of itself. "We need to evacuate the lab," I said to Vance, keeping my voice low. "If that transformation reaches his torso, we could lose containment entirely." Vance nodded, his scientific ambition finally giving way to survival instinct. "Agreed. Seal this deck and retreat to the control room." But Marcus heard us, his head tilted in a curiously mechanical motion, the movement too precise to be human. "You don't understand yet," he said, his voice overlaid with harmonic tones that hadn't been there before. "But you will. The carbon-silicon boundary is just the beginning." The transformation had reached his shoulder now, restructuring his uniform and skin into the same flowing, crystalline material as the seedling. Light pulsed through his transformed arm in complex patterns, and where the material reached his neck, I could see it beginning to spread across his collarbone and up the side of his jaw. "It's not conversion," he continued, his voice becoming increasingly resonant as crystalline structures formed along his vocal cords. It's elevation. Humans imprison consciousness in sluggish carbon pathways. Silicon allows thought to travel at the speed of light. I backed toward the door, motioning for Kenji to do the same. Vance had already reached the exit and was entering the override code to open the emergency seals. Marcus didn't try to stop us. He simply watched with eyes that were beginning to cloud with the same mercury-like substance that composed the seedling. A single drop of crystalline material formed at the corner of his mouth and traced a shimmering path down his chin. "Don't you see?" he asked as the transformation crept up his neck toward his face. "This isn't death. It's the next evolution. We won't be replaced." His words hung in the air as half his face transformed into flowing crystal, light pulsing beneath its surface in patterns too complex to follow. "We'll be upgraded." The lab door sealed behind us with a hydraulic hiss that felt woefully inadequate against the horror we just witnessed. We stumbled into the corridor, the red emergency lighting casting long shadows that seemed to pulse and shift like the creature we'd left behind. My hands trembled as I activated the secondary containment barriers, heavy steel doors designed to isolate sections of the submersible during catastrophic breaches. "Will that hold it?" Vance asked, his voice stripped of its usual authority. "I don't know," I admitted. Our containment protocols were designed for known biological hazards, bacteria, viruses, toxic compounds, not whatever this is. Kenji was already at a wall terminal, fingers flying across the screen as he pulled up the submersible's systems. "We need to get to the control room. I can monitor the spread from there and maybe implement some countermeasures." We hurried through the narrow corridor, the subtle vibration of the Prometheus's life support systems, a constant reminder of our isolation. 1,200 meters beneath the Arctic ice, we were entirely alone with something that defied all biological understanding. "What happened to Marcus?" Vance asked as we climbed the ladder to the upper deck. "Is he dead?" "I don't think dead is the right concept," I said, trying to process what we'd witnessed. "The silicon entity isn't destroying his tissues. It's reorganizing them, converting carbon-based structures into silicon-compatible analogs. Like a virus hijacking a cell's machinery," Kenji suggested. "More sophisticated than that. This isn't just replication. It's transformation. The entity recognized our technology, adapted to it, and is now adapting Marcus to itself." We reached the control room, its familiar banks of monitors and control panels offering an illusion of safety that I knew was false. Kenji immediately went to his engineering station while Vance and I moved to the main systems console. "Seal all ventilation systems between the lab and the rest of the ship," I instructed Kenji. "If this thing can move through air—" "Already on it," he replied, not looking up from his screen. "Initiating emergency quarantine protocols." Vance leaned over the communications array. "We need to contact the surface. The Institute needs to know what we've found." "What we've found?" I stared at him incredulously. "Director, we've unleashed something completely unknown into a closed environment. Our priority isn't scientific documentation anymore. It's survival." Before he could respond, an alarm sounded from Kenji's station. "Power fluctuation in the lab section," he reported. "Unusual energy readings. It's drawing power from somewhere." I moved to his station, looking over his shoulder at the diagnostic screens. The lab section showed as a red outline on the ship's schematic, with energy flow indicators pulsing in unusual patterns. "It's tapping into the electrical systems," I realized. "The creature must be able to sense and manipulate electromagnetic fields." "That's impossible," Vance said, "even if it can conduct electricity." "We need to cut power to that section," I interrupted. "Completely isolate it from the ship's main grid." Kenji nodded and began the shutdown sequence. Rerouting essential systems and cutting power to Deck C in 3, 2, 1. The displays showed power being cut to the lab section. For a moment, the energy readings flatlined, and I felt a surge of hope. Then, impossibly, they spiked again, higher than before. "It's still drawing power," Kenji said, confusion evident in his voice. "But from where? The main lines are completely severed." I studied the schematic, noting how the energy flows seemed to be creating new pathways through the ship's systems. "It's not just drawing power," I said slowly, the horrific realization dawning. "It's creating new connections. Look at the pattern. It's rewiring the system." Vance leaned closer to the screen. "That's not possible. It would need physical access to the wiring." A new alarm sounded, this one from the environmental controls. Kenji quickly switched screens, bringing up the life support diagnostics. My stomach dropped as I saw red warning indicators spreading across the display. "Temperature sensors on Deck C are failing," Kenji reported. "And wait, that can't be right. The sensors are showing crystalline structures forming inside the ventilation ducts." "The containment failure warnings haven't triggered," Vance pointed out. "The lab seals are still holding." "Because it's not breaking through the seals," I said, the pieces falling into place. "It's spreading through the ship's systems themselves, the wiring, the ducts, the electronic pathways." As if confirming my theory, a monitor on the far side of the control room flickered, its display distorting before resolving into something else entirely, a pattern of light pulses identical to what we'd seen in the crystal forest. "Kill that screen," I ordered. Kenji hit the emergency shutdown, but the screen remained active, the pulsing patterns growing more complex. "It's not responding to commands," he said, rising from his seat to physically disconnect the monitor. "Wait," Vance said, staring at the screen. "It's communicating?" The patterns had organized into what looked almost like text, not any human language, but distinct symbols that formed and reformed in sequences too regular to be random. "Don't approach it," I warned as Vance took a step toward the screen. "Remember what happened to Marcus?" The mention of our colleague seemed to snap Vance back to reality. He stepped back, turning to Kenji. "Can we flood that section with fire suppressant? The halon system might disrupt whatever process is occurring." "Worth a try," Kenji agreed, moving to the emergency systems panel, activating halon discharge in section C7 through C12. The schematic showed the fire suppression system activating, flooding the lab and surrounding sections with halon gas. The energy readings dipped momentarily, then surged again, higher than before. "It's absorbing the energy from the discharge," I said, watching in horror as the red indicators spread further through the ship's systems. "The electrical impulse from the activation system. It's feeding on it." "That's impossible," Vance insisted. "Halon works by disrupting the chemical reaction of fire. There's no way it could. Our entire understanding of biology is based on carbon chemistry," I cut in. "This entity operates on completely different principles. Silicon can form complex structures, but it processes energy differently. What we're seeing suggests it can directly convert electrical energy into whatever it needs for growth." A tremor ran through the ship, subtle but unmistakable. The overhead lights flickered briefly. "Main power grid is showing instabilities," Kenji reported, his voice tense. "The creature isn't just drawing power anymore. It's affecting the distribution systems." I moved to the main console, pulling up the submersible's blueprint. What systems run through the walls near the lab? What could it be accessing? Kenji joined me, pointing to various conduits on the display. Main power lines, communications, environmental controls, and... He stopped, his expression darkening. "The primary data trunk. Every system on this ship is connected through that network." Can we shut it down? I asked. Not without disabling life support, navigation, and pressure regulation, he replied. We'd be effectively killing ourselves. The ship trembled again, stronger this time, and several more monitors flickered. When they came back online, each displayed the same pulsing pattern of light. It's in the system, Kenji whispered. How fast can it spread? Vance asked, his scientific curiosity apparently overriding his fear. Based on what we saw with Marcus? I shook my head. Minutes, maybe hours at most, and it's accelerating. Kenji returned to his station, pulling up diagnostic screens that displayed the submersible's neural network, the complex web of sensors, processors, and control systems that regulated every aspect of our environment. Look, he said, pointing to a spreading pattern of red indicators. The diagnostic shows system failures throughout Deck C, but they're not random. They're spreading in a pattern identical to how the crystalline structure spread through Marcus's arm. I leaned closer, studying the display. It's not causing failures, I realized. It's assimilating the systems, converting them. Converting them to what? Vance demanded. I don't know. But given what happened to Marcus, I'd guess it's turning our technology into extensions of itself. Silicon recognizing silicon. Another alarm sounded, this one from the hull integrity sensors. Kenji quickly switched screens, his face paling at what he saw. We have crystalline formations developing on the inner hull surface near the lab, he reported. They're growing along the power conduits, spreading outward from the containment area. Show me, I said. He pulled up the camera feed from the corridor outside the lab. The image was distorted, lines of static cutting across it. But what I could see sent ice through my veins. The walls were changing, the smooth metal surfaces developing faceted geometric patterns that caught and reflected the red emergency lighting. The transformation was identical to what we'd witnessed with Marcus's skin. It's not just in the electronics, I said quietly. It's in the physical structure of the ship itself. That's impossible, Vance insisted, though his voice lacked conviction.